Hi, guys, and welcome to the fourth episode of the ACFL Offseason Breakdowns. Today, we're covering the last of the AFC North here with the Baltimore Ravens. I've got SteelBadker here again with me, and let's jump right into the re-signing period. So, one of the only big players that they let go was Matt Judon, and then they also let go of Derek Wolfe. But beyond that, they brought back most of the big names in Ngakoue, Bowser, Edwards, and McPhee. So, good job there. And I think that Yannick Ngakoue deal is a good price there. I think 2 years, 26 mil. That's a fairly good price for a guy who didn't quite have a great year last year. I do feel that Titus Bowser number is a little high, but I'm guessing, since it's a 3-year deal, he had to give more. And then second-year tender on Gus, and then that min on McPhee. Mostly good moves here. Any opinions from you there, Steele?
I think those are pretty solid. They had a little bit more work to do than kind of our first ones. It's like, okay, they had a little bit more they were losing. Titus Bowser, it's kind of one of their developmental guys who hasn't quite hit the threshold maybe they expect. So re-signing that guy who maybe still has a little bit of room to grow is pretty smart. And I think they signed him in real life too. So that helps me, stays on the team, that kind of stuff. Yannick, so I think this matches the real life deal he got to the Raiders. I don't know if he's worth 13. He's been kind of allured after for years now, and he hasn't really lived up to that billing. But they didn't have a lot of options left. This was kind of along the last of their options. So maybe it's a slight overpay, but it's definitely better than the alternative they could have had. And it's not like it's going to kill them either. I mean, 13 million next year is not going to kill him too bad.
And I know I don't think all of it's guaranteed. So maybe worst case, they can move on from him. But I'm going to give it a B. I think, letting Judon go and Wolf, that's got to hurt. I know they were, kind of tight in the cap when they were initially starting, but I think these are relatively fair prices, and I think, the right moves.
Yeah, I think so. Just the signings they made, probably like a C+, but they're going to probably get a third round comp pick from Judon. So probably B-. I mean, if they get a third rounder out of that, that's probably the best case scenario for them. It's like, okay, if you get a third round pick, this is how they do it. They let their edges go that they develop, they collect their comp pick, and they draft another one. So I think that overall that was pretty solid for them. So B- for me.
Fair enough. And we'll move into the off-season trades where they were another team that was very busy here with the big blockbuster move, differing from the real return here. Orlando Brown is going to the Denver Broncos with a pick 119 for the Green Bay first next year and pick 40. That's a big deal, and it's more than what they got in real life. I'll give them that. High second and the low first next year. I think that's a good deal for them.
Yeah, I agree. As part of this, their trades are pretty solid, right? You get 42 for Calais Campbell, you get 40 for Orlando Brown, and you're sitting there pretty solid. But I do think part of this is undercut by them giving so much to move up too. So it was a good thing they moved down with New England to kind of offset that, but their move ups have kind of dampened the trade because Orlando Brown, they get Green Bay's late first next year, but they used it to move up. They used pick 42. Oh, they moved down with 40. Yeah. But 42 that they got for Campbell, they moved up with.
Yeah.
So, and then their own second they moved up with. So it's just they didn't make a lot of picks in this year because they then moved up. So they did a good job acquiring them and then gave them all kind of right back up for one player, which it just puts a lot of pressure on that one player to work.
Yeah. But I would think, especially with the pre-draft ones, I think they that Calais Campbell one was a great deal for them. Giving up a late third round pick for Michael Gallup, that's crazy. And then this June 1 deal here with the Bills to get Ed Oliver in a second. I mean, that's, I guess they're kind of trying to get away from their older players. He did tell me he was trying to soft rebuild the team, and I guess, he had a lot of draft capital to give. I don't necessarily think he overpaid or anything like that for all the trades he made. It's just, yeah, you look at his draft board, he only had 4 picks, and but that move down with New England's good. The price they paid to move up the Raiders, it's all right. And then the Vikings, I'm surprised they got that second back. So I'll give this a B plus. I think they won most of their trades, didn't really lose any trades, so I can't really knock them for it. So I'll give them a B plus.
Yeah, I think they lose the trade ups just because they had to make 2 of them to get the guy they wanted.
Mhm.
So they had to pay. I mean, they way overpaid to go from 17 to 14.
Mhm.
Like that was a pretty comfortable overpay.
Mhm.
So that's kind of part of this. Also, it's just like kind of a different in expectations to what I expected. Kind of similar to the Bengals thing, except for they were already a great team.
Yeah.
So they kind of just like, we're going to tear down our team, but they could afford to play camp for this year and next year because Lamar is going to be cheap.
Mhm.
So there's the part that's just like, you're not going to replace Calais Campbell with anything better. Ed Oliver could work out still, but he's a risk, a pretty good risk, but like they're making a play for the future when their team building is going to be much more difficult because their quarterback's so much more expensive. So it's part of the thing. It's just like, I don't think they're maximizing their opportunity they have because like they didn't make great moves in real life. That's kind of where you're sitting. It's like these moves aren't like enough, but because the quarterback was so cheap, they had room to maneuver it and maybe get around some of the poor moves they made. So just kind of, split the difference on that. But again, their trades are good. So probably B plus. If they make good trades, it's just, I don't believe that their goal was high enough. Their aspirations weren't big enough this year.
Well, and I look at their draft. I know you mentioned the Raiders one. I don't think that was an overpay at all, actually. You gave up a low first, a low second, low fifth, low sixth, and next year 6th to move up 10 spots. Like, I'm being honest, if I'm the Raiders, I probably wouldn't have taken that.
Oh, sorry. I was talking about the Vikings one.
Oh, the Vikings one. Well, I think it's okay. I mean, it depends on how highly you rate the Vikings. I mean, I still think maybe that's a top 20 pick next year in the second round. So I guess it kind of evens itself up to move 3 spots and secure like their pick at 14. So it's all right, I guess. So yeah, I'm with you here. It does feel like, they've kind of shortchanged themselves here, but considering the draft capital they have, acquired for the future, I'll give them credit for where it's due. They've at least got them, I guess, jump starting on their future process with Lamar. Moving into free agency, we've got 4 moves. One very recent one with Josh Reynolds. So they got him on a vet min. Robbie Coleman, he's probably going to be the Jimmy Smith replacement vet min. Bringing in Zietler, like in real life, it's a bit of an overpay, I think. And then getting Tack McKinley on a 1-year deal, I think that's good value there. So I think outside of Zietler, these were pretty good acquisitions here.
So I'm gonna kind of, I guess, zag with you there because I think that there was like perfectly fine value for them. Like 3 years, 30.
He got $8 million less in real life.
Yeah, but I still think that because of the nature of where their team is, they have to run the ball well. Getting a great guard in there to do that, I think it's well worth it. I don't think he wasn't worth more than what he got in real life. It's just that's what it took to get him. So I think that it's still fair value for Zeitler. And I think, and again, kind of comes into the whole, I think they're ready to go. They can afford these guys because their quarterback's cheap. So that kind of plays into it a little bit. But yeah, then the vet mins, they're solid value. Tack McKinley, he could still be a number 2 edge guy in the league. So I think if it came to it, he could rotate in and give you some production. Just because he's a first round bust doesn't mean he can't be a productive player.
Yeah, and he's had some up and downs in his career with health, and he's shown flashes too. I'm gonna give his free agency. I'm gonna give it a B plus. I like the vet min deals. I still think Zietler makes a lot of sense, so I'm not gonna knock it too hard, but I do feel it's, considering how much they pay more than real life, I'm gonna knock it down a little bit. How about you?
I definitely thought you were going for like a C grade based on
what you're talking about. I still think because the moves they made make sense.
So now I was talking him up, and then I'm going to give him the same grade that you did because I don't like. So B plus is what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I was thinking you were like B minus C plus.
Well, when I look at these free agent moves, I see a plan. So, and I still think Zietler makes sense. It's just it felt like it was good moves. It's just that one move kind of it felt like you paid a little too much. So that's where I'm not going to give you the stunning grade, but I still feel this is an above average free agency. It's good.
Yeah,
I'm kind of more on a borderline B. So I guess that's kind of what I would give it. Moving to the draft, this is where we've been, talking a lot about their lack of picks this year, even though they have an insane amount of picks next year. So we had mentioned pick 14, trading up, and they get their Orlando Brown replacement in Christian Darrisaw. How do you feel about this one?
I love Darrisaw. This is about where I would have taken him.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually kind of a similar thing to the Vera Tucker trade that the Jets made. It's like they give up this much for one lineman when there could have been other linemen there to fill out some of the holes they had.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, is this going to work out? Like for the Vera Tucker thing, based on how much they gave, Vera Tucker would have to be like a top 5 guard for it to be worth it for the trade.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're in a similar, like he's going to have to be a top 10, 15 tackle in the league for this trade to be worth it. So it's like, can you get there? I definitely think he can.
Mm-hmm.
But you're putting a lot on him to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I still if you take pick 14 for Darrisaw, I give it an A. That's what I would have given the Vikings if they took it.
Mm-hmm.
When you factor in the trade up, it's like you're like talking more in the B plus range. It's an above average pick. It's just not. It's not like a killer. It's not a killer value. Because he fell in real life too, which doesn't help. But I think that he still was good value at 14, as he could have been.
I've kind of got it around that grade too. I'm pretty high on Darrisaw, but I still think the value's good. Just 14's where anyone would have taken him, and I think if the Vikings didn't trade down, they said it themselves they were going to pick him at 14. But I think it's a good pick. I'm high on him. I'm confident in him, so I understand why they traded up. But maybe we can get into it here because I think that's been a point of contention. Do you think they should have stayed at 17? And who do you think they would have even got at 17?
Tevin Jenkins.
Tevin Jenkins, yeah. Well, because I'm putting myself in their head. I didn't think that Bears pick. I thought that was going to be Tevin Jenkins. I mean, they got rid of their tackle there, so I thought that was the pick. And I thought Vikings. I'm guessing they were thinking the Vikings were going to take Darrisaw, so that's why they kind of panicked. But again, they did kind of play themselves a little bit because they had, if they had picked 42 and 40 in the second round, I mean, that's probably another good player they could have got. So I'm going to also agree. I'm going to give it a B plus. I think it's, it's definitely good value because he kind of falls because Slater falls a bit. So that's good value. Yeah, I can't give it a stunning grade just because, they traded up super high. Moving on to pick 55, Ronnie Perkins. He fell in real life to the Pats in the 3rd round. And if I didn't think he was a solid prospect, I wouldn't be very lenient here. I'm going to give it a B minus. I honestly feel I'm being a bit generous.
I like him a lot. I like him in the scheme and stuff. They have 6 edge guys. They signed a lot of edges. So it's just there's a little bit of that seeing the field for him is going to be more difficult. I think I slated him into the starter, but it's hard to see him getting more than a 40% share of the snaps. Because he was rotational at Oklahoma too. So it's just there's that element of he's not going to beat Fernell McPhee, most likely, at least not outright beat him, because Fernell McPhee is just that much stronger and more experienced. It's not going to happen. So when you put yourself in a position where you have so few picks, you really have got to hit these. And I don't think this isn't a hit. I don't think it's not a hit, but I don't think it's just okay, you can justify on having only 2 players because of this guy. So I'd probably give it about the same. I'm thinking more I just like him push as a player. Okay, B minus. I'll go with B minus.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I can understand it. I still think he's a good prospect. Like at 55, I looked over the board. There weren't a whole lot of picks that made a lot of sense outside of that for them. And I think the value is good. On most consensus board, he was anyway seen as a second round pick. So that's what I'm not going to knock it too hard because I'm sure that's probably what they wanted to do at 40. Or no, would they have done that at 40? They probably would have gone receiver. Anyways, speaking of receivers, 184, Sage Sherratt. He was surprisingly undrafted in real life, but I think he's kind of that, big receiver that kind of, can get the ball a little physically. I think it's an okay pick. Yeah, I'm going to give it a B. I think it's okay. I know he didn't get drafted in real life, but I think him, the player, I think it's justifiable to pick him there. Most consensus boards anyways had him there. So, yeah.
Yeah. So in my mind, they only made 2 draft picks this draft. I expected Sage Sherratt to be undrafted.
Oh,
so
yeah? Oh, jeez.
I don't think that either of these two, Stevenson may be more likely than Sherratt, but I don't think either of these two are ever serious contributors to their team.
Ooh.
At least not above like even Duvernay from last year. Like I don't think that they're anything more than the 4th wide receiver, 5th wide receiver on their team, and even that projection is quite the lead.
Mm-hmm. So what you got the grade at?
So their draft grade is getting rough.
The Sage, yeah.
Oh, Sage Sherratt, a D. I didn't see it at the time. A D.
Oh, D. Yeah, I can see that. I probably maybe adjust it to a C plus on my side, so I'll probably knock it down to a C minus. I guess that's probably fair if that's the even between the two. Marquez Stevenson, he's very similar to Marquise, who's a player they already have, but I've seen his film. I like him. I know he went in the 6th round in real life. I'm gonna give it a C plus. I want to give it a B minus, but I'm gonna give it a C plus just because they went receiver with the last pick and it was only 2 picks before. And I'm not sure if it makes a whole lot of sense, but I like the player, so I'm gonna give it a C plus. How about you?
Yeah, that's about where I'd be. C plus.
C plus. So looking at their draft grade, it definitely rough. I guess you take the average, it's probably around B minus. So yeah, I think that's a fair grade. Maybe a B or B minus, probably B minus borders on B. B minus bordering on B for me, just because I think Darsaw is good value.
Yeah, see, I'm looking closer to going C. This is a flat C for them. Just because you make such few picks and you see one person being a true starter, another person being a contributor, but projects to be a starter, and then those other 2 guys are long shots to be. I wouldn't be surprised if one of them doesn't make the roster.
Well, I don't know, because Sage Sherratt, I think he got picked up by the Lions, and that receiving room is pretty weak. So maybe he gets some snaps. And I don't know about Stevenson.
Yeah, you maybe try to keep him on a practice squad. I'm saying I don't think they make the 53-man roster based off their team.
Interesting.
They could. I mean, it's not necessarily a great receiver room here, so you keep them because you drafted them. But I think if it was just they inherited this team and they didn't have the attachment to making the draft pick, one of these guys doesn't make the roster.
Fair enough.
If not both. Oh,
so that brings our total draft grade for the Ravens down to a C plus, and we have a statement from the Ravens owner, Big Truss. We were asking him what was his goal for the offseason. He said to acquire picks, also cap, and make sure the roster is at a playoff level for next year. His favorite transaction was getting Michael Gallup, and he thinks he's going to be huge for them. Somebody who he's confident will flourish as a number 1 wideout, opening up Marquise in the slot and making our passing game much more effective. And for that price, it was just a really good bargain. We asked him what his favorite draft pick was. He said Darsaw is exactly who I was angling for all draft long. I really felt that he'll be a great tackle in the NFL, and to add him to Kevin, our offensive line is much stronger. Felt that we kept most of the value we got from Orlando, so ultimately a great result for us. And what are his expectations for the season, we asked him. He said playoffs for sure. I do feel we could slip under the radar of other top AFC teams. With a tough schedule this year, it may hurt our record, but we've, in my opinion, been able to stay as competitive as last year. I wouldn't count us out just yet. Before we get into the lineup and final grades, any thoughts on their statements here?
So kind of the keeping the draft picks thing, I don't think they accomplished, at least not for this year. A lot of this banks on how they do next year. They have like 7 picks in the top 60 or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's, you can have all these picks. What do you do with them too? And they're probably fine. I think that they, if they're in a better position to take a guy like Derek Carr next year, like their scouting seemed pretty solid on him. It's just I think they fell in love with him too much, which the same thing could happen next year. I mean, they could be looking at 2 mid to late firsts, and then they're like, oh, but I want this top 10 talent. I have all these picks. All of a sudden, they give 4 picks to get into the top 10, and then they don't have any draft picks anymore. And it's just all the athletes they've acquired has turned into 2 players. And if one of those 2 players doesn't work out, which is relatively likely, then all of a sudden you've given up a ton for 1 player. So it's just they're putting themselves in a position where I think if they sit put next year, that's fine. But it's kind of the thing like they always show, like the Raiders continue to show they're going to reach for a guy, and they keep doing it. If they seem so eager to move up, they did it multiple times. Are they not going to fall in love with a top 10 guy next year?
That's true. And I do question, since they have so much capital. But I'd be interested to see, because what is their plan past next year exactly? Because that really probably determines what they even do with those picks, like whether they keep them and trade whatever for players or something like that. I know on paper having that many picks is good. Based off of this draft, I don't completely trust them to make the right picks if they did keep all of them. So I'm gonna be cautious about the Ravens' future. And that kind of brings us into the offseason final grade. I have the final grade. I'm going to put a B-. I think the free agency and trades kind of knock it up a little bit for me. And I think they did okay in everything else besides the draft. I think just because they didn't have the volume of picks in the draft, it kind of knocks it down. I'm going to go B-. I think, they mostly achieved their goal. It's just, I don't know if I'm, loving their offseason as much as I thought I did.
Yeah, I almost want to give them a TBD. We'll see next year. But like, I think that they did fine. Their stated goal of making the playoffs, they failed that pretty. Yeah, at least on paper. Compared to teams that actually made those moves, it would have been asking a lot for them to do the moves they did in the way that they did, to rebuild and kind of reset, and then still expect to make the playoffs with everybody making these pushes to the playoffs and to the Super Bowl. It would have been, with the schedule, I think it would be very unlikely to see 2 AFC North teams in the playoffs, just because it's a competitive division too. And then also, so I would just say they didn't quite achieve either goal, but it's also to be determined because they could have. Long term, we look back at it and say, well, they really killed this offseason because the 10 players they drafted in 2022 ended up helping them win a Super Bowl. So kind of weird like that.
So then, have you got a final grade for them there?
Yeah, so I said B-.
B-, yeah, right where I had them. Yeah, okay. Sounds fair. Moving on to the projected lineup. I'll give him this. The offense is a lot better than last year. Getting Gallup, Reynolds, Zietler, and then moving Bozeman and Macari back. It kind of remains to be seen how Darrisaw is, going to compare to Orlando. But, if you could have a strong year, I could see this being a pretty good offense heading into next season.
Yeah, I think their offense is maybe better. It's not better than 2 years ago, because their tight end room is worse on the whole, and that's kind of the way that they've always ran their offense to be. And their growing pains of trying to use a guy like Gallup in the way that he needs to be used. And Marquise Brown, I'm still guessing he's going to be on the outside. He's not necessarily that great in the slot. He's a much better deep threat.
Well, I'm guessing just because he's a run after catch guy. That's probably what his thought process would be. Yeah.
So I mean, their offensive line concerns me still because they have 2 guys who are going to be good. Stanley might miss a couple games early in the year too, because he might not be healthy for the start of the season. There's talks that he may miss a couple games. Kind of why they got Villanueva in real life. So I'm assuming they're just going to start somebody, and that's going to be rough for a couple games. So I think that Darrisaw will be good. but maybe not quite good enough as a rookie to put this unit into the place it needs to be the elite running unit they need.
Mm-hmm.
So their offense, I'm sitting probably in a quality starter level, not quite in the elite like they could be.
Yeah.
Maybe you projected they could be by the end of the year or into next year, but preseason wise, I think they're sitting kind of closer to like the 78, 79 range, just because that offensive line is so integral to the way they run things.
And I got them at an 82. I think Lamar is going to, in particular, have a much better year with a much improved receiving core, and I would think an offensive line in general. If J.K. Dobbins, a lot of these guys, they really need to have comeback years, and that's kind of the consistent theme you're going to see as we go through the lineup here. A lot of young guys that you really need to see take the big step. I think from a talent standpoint, I think they're around, I'm going to say an 81. But I think with your 78, that brings them down to, I think, a 79. I'm going to put them at that as our total for them. And then we move on to the defense. Yannick Ngakoue, Tack McKinley, Ed Oliver, Bowser, Perkins / McPhee, and Queen and Harrison. How are you feeling about that front seven?
Closer to being bottom 10 in the league than above average.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's okay. I don't. It's a lot of young guys that they really need to have good years from. They need this Titus Bowser guy to really pan out for them. Ed Oliver to kind of pick it up, and if they can get a good year out of Ronnie Perkins, then hey, maybe that brings up the offseason grade a bit. But with Patrick Queen and Harrison, these are a lot of young guys. They're really banking on having good second, third years in the league, and it's hard for me to kind of it's just because I think their secondary is pretty strong with Humphrey, Peters, and Robbie Coleman. I think's been really good slot corner for them, and then bringing in they got Elliott and Clark already, so that kind of evens it out a bit. I'm probably going to knock their defense down. I'm going to say a 76. I still think it's a good defense. I don't think it's quite nearly as good as I think he thinks it is.
Yeah, I think the safeties are more of a question mark than he acted like they were. He never tried to draft anybody or bring anybody in. I think they could have used somebody brought in to push these guys or have a rotation at least. And I think the corners are good. Kind of worried, though, about eventually Marcus Peters aging. I don't think he's done it for 10 years, but he might start soon.
Yeah.
And then linebackers Patrick Queen's going to have to play significantly better than he did as a rookie. Yeah. I project him to be better than he was as a rookie because he was really bad. But that's a rookie linebacker trying to learn the ropes. And I don't think he is that player. He's somewhere much higher than that player, but not this year. And then I think Ed Oliver moving to DN is probably the way they actually should go because he looked atrocious at the nose. They got Sarlatule or whatever his last name is pronounced as. He probably is a better nose. That's what he did in Buffalo. But last year he was hurt. So is he going to be hurt again? You're going to have to play, two people out of position and Ed Oliver to the nose and tack into inside. I actually see Bowser being the guy to kick in instead of Tack if it came to that, because I think Bowser's got a little bit more power on the inside, a little bit better run defender. They're a team that could run a lot more just like nickel and kind of hide their lack of D-line depth.
Yeah, I mean, they've got guys. It's just it feels like they're all unproven commodities, and yeah, I still think it's going to be a good defense. I still think it's hard for me to dispute it being anything worse than a top 20 unit. So I still think it's got the upside just because their secondary is pretty good. And, maybe Ngakoue and McKinley is a bit better than we think it is. I don't know. We'll see how it goes in game, but I've got them at a 76. How about you?
Yeah, probably about the same. I might go to a 77 just I think their pass rushing upside is better than last year.
Fair enough. I'll mark it up to that. And I know he mentioned playoffs. He felt like this is a team that makes the playoffs. I don't really know. I don't know how I feel about that because I know the schedule was hard this year. And, this does feel like a real boomer bust team, if you ask me. they need these young guys to really step up, and I don't really know if they can. And yeah, I think this is probably not the candidate, I think, of the AFC that's going to be that, quote unquote surprise playoff misser, I think.
Well, like they're fighting for the wild card with Miami, New England. You've got
the entire
Colts.
AFC South.
Titans are Colts, one of them. The Jags have a lot of
Jags.
moves. They could be threatening them for that playoff spot. And then the schedule they're playing is just much more difficult than other people's schedules will be. Well, also the Chargers. The Chargers and maybe not the Broncos. The Broncos are lower. But like you have like 4 or 5 teams vying for 2 spots. Or 3 spots.
3 spots.
Still
yep,
3 spots?
Yeah, it's still 3 spots.
I don't like that. Whatever. We're all done. So maybe they sneak in and get that 3rd spot. Kind of on the backs of beating. They have to sweep the Steelers and Bengals, which I don't know if they will. Their team isn't that much better than those teams at this point because they didn't maximize their team to be like, yeah, those are 4 wins. So we start off 4-0. They're not there. And then I doubt
it's really off the back of Lamar, if you're asking me. And I know they made strides in the offense, and I think their season really contends on whether Lamar Jackson has, at least some form of a return to form. And I have a sneaky feeling that defense, that front 7, it's not going to work out. It maybe it could, like the rushing aspect. I just don't know if Patrick Queen and Malik Harrison are going to be good enough for them. So I probably have them in my prediction either a fringe playoff team or missing the playoffs altogether. Yeah, and I think he mentioned like he thinks that this is a team that could kind of disrupt some of the big dogs. I mean, that's really up to Lamar Jackson and how good this defense really is. It's hard to discern, but I don't know if this has been. This is a really divisive team. I'm just going to say it's boom or bust. Probably biggest boom or bust of the higher division.
Yeah.
Anyways, anything left to say about the Ravens?
No, I don't think so.
Nope. I think we covered it all. So thanks again for listening to our podcast. That concludes our entire AFC North. We'll be moving on to the AFC East next week. And thanks for listening.